Hello, my name is Gerald Koroscil, and I'll be reading chapter 12 of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Mr. Tolkien wrote this book in 1937. So this is chapter 12. This is the inside information. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon, fast asleep. Thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretching away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold, wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels and silver, red stained in the ruddy light. Smaug lay, with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partly on one side, so that the Hobbit could see his underparts, and his long, pale belly crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest and could dimly be seen, coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging. And there in rows stood great jars and vessels filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo, that is the Hobbit's name, Bilbo Baggins, and a Hobbit is like a smaller dwarf. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changing the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the world was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tell and sing of dragon hordes before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment and with the desire of dwarves, and he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian at the gold beyond price and count. He gazed for what seemed an age. Before dawn, almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him, the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace, even in his sleep. He grasped a two-handled cup, as heavy as he could carry, and cast one fearful eye upwards. Smaug stirred a wing, opened a claw. The rumble of his snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, but the dragon did not wake. Not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, lying there in his stolen hall while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating, and a more fevered shaking was in his legs than when he was going down. But still he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, "I've done it. This will show them. More like a grocer than a burglar. Indeed, we'll hear no more of that." Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the Hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air. It was midnight, and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, and how they praised him and patted him on the back, and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarves were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked from closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes from far down in the depths of a bellowing and a trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Then the dwarves forgot their joy and their confident boasts of a moment before and cowered down in fright. Smaug was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce as a rule, especially after a long possession, and Smaug was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream in which a warrior, altogether insignificant in size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly, to a doze, and from a doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from that little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late, he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from far above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. And then he missed the cup. Thieves, fire, murder. Such a thing had not happened since first he came to the mountain. His rage passes description, the sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had but never before used or wanted. His fire belched forth. The hall smoked. He shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at the little hole, and then coiling his length together, roaring like thunder underground, he sped from his deep lair through its great door, out into the huge passages of the mountain palace, up towards the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had torn and trampled him was his one thought. He issued from the gate. The waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared, blazing into the air, and settled on the mountain top in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarves heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have all been killed if it had not been for Bilbo once again. "Quick, quick," he gasped. "The door, the tunnel, it's no good here." Roused by these words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. "My cousins, Bombur and Bofur, we have forgotten them. They are down in the valley." "They will be slain, and all our ponies too, and all our stores lost," moaned the others. "We can do nothing." "Nonsense," said Thorin, recovering his dignity. "We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin. And you two, Philly and Killy the dragon, shan't have all of us. Now you others, where are the ropes? Be quick." Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. The horrible sounds of Smaug's anger were echoing in the stony hollows far above. At any moment he might come blazing down or fly whirling round and find them there, near the perilous cliff's edge, mauling madly on the ropes. Up came Bofur, and still all was safe. Up came Bombur, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and then danger was upon them. A whirring noise was heard. A red light touched the points of standing rocks. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging in their bundles, when Smog came hurtling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flame, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the grass before the door and drove it in through the crack they had left and scorched them as they lay hid. Flickering fires leaped up and black rock shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he passed again. The ponies screamed with terror, burst their ropes, and galloped wildly off. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them and was gone. "That'll be the end of our poor beast," said Thorin. "Nothing can escape Smog once he sees it. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay, unless anyone fancies tromping the long open miles back to the river with Smog on the watch." It was not a pleasant thought. They crept further down the tunnel, and there they lay and shivered, though it was warm and stuffy, until dawn came pale through the crack at the door. Every now and again, through the night, they could hear the roar of the flying dragon grow and then pass and fade as he hunted round and round the mountainsides. He guessed from the ponies and from the traces of the camps he had discovered that men had come up from the river and the lake and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing. But the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high-walled bay had kept out his fiercest flames. Long he had hunted in vain, till the dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to his golden couch to sleep, and to gather new strength. He would not forget or forgive the theft, not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent, he crept back to his lair and half closed his eyes. When morning came, the terror of the dwarves grew less. They realized that dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, that it was no good giving up their quest yet, nor could they get away just now, as Thorin had pointed out. Their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smog relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smog, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as is the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the Hobbit, blaming him for what had first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smog's wrath too soon. "What else do you suppose a burglar is to do?" asked Bilbo angrily. "I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is warriors' work, but to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of Thror on my back? If there is any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I am sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend you ever made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up, if I was 50 times as big and Smog as tame as a rabbit." After that, of course, the dwarves begged his pardon. "What then do you propose we should do, Mr. Baggins?" asked Thorin politely. "I have no idea at the moment. If you mean about removing the treasure, that obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck and the getting rid of Smog. Getting rid of dragons is not at all in my line, but I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all and wish I was safe back at home. Never mind that for a moment. What are we to do now, today? Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but stay where we are. By day, we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take the air. Perhaps before long, one or two could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies. But in the meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I have got my ring and will creep down this very noon. Then, if ever Smog ought to be napping and see what he is up to, perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has his weak spot, as my father used to say, though I am sure it was not from personal experience. Naturally, the dwarves accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become the real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now. He knew, more or less, what was in front of him. Had he known more about dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door, almost closed, soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that smoke on a gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near the lower door. There was only the very fainter glow to be seen. Old Smog is weary and asleep, he thought. He can't see me, and he won't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo. He had forgotten, or had never heard about dragons' sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they keep half an eye open, watching while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Smog certainly looked half asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore, more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance. He was just about to step out to the floor, when he caught a sudden thin and piercing ray of red from under the drooping lid of Smog's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of his ring. Then Smog spoke. "Well, thief, I smell you and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along, help yourself again. There is plenty and to spare." But Bilbo was not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that. And if Smog hoped to get him to come near so easily, he was disappointed. "No, thank you, O Smog the Tremendous," he replied. "I did not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as tales say." "I did not believe them." "Do you now?" said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. "Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality, O Smog, the chiefest and greatest of calamities," replied Bilbo. "You have nice manners for a thief and a liar," said the dragon. "You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask?" "You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills and over the hills my paths led." and through the air. I am he that walks unseen. So I can well believe, said Smog, but that is hardly our usual name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I is chosen for the lucky number. Lovely title, sneered the dragon, but lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them alive again from the water. I came from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. These don't sound so creditable, scoffed Smog. I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ring winner and luck wearer, and I am barrel rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smog, but don't let your imagination run away with you. This, of course, is the way to talk to dragons. If you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also very wise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here which Smog did not understand at all, although I expect you do, since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring. But he thought he understood enough, and he chuckled in his wicked inside. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself. Lake men, some nasty scheme of those miserable tub-trading lake men, or I'm a lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age and an age, but I will soon after that. Very well, old barrel rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, or maybe not. Though it was fat enough, you may walk unseen, but you do not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your own good. Don't have more to do with the dwarves than you can help. Dwarves, said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smog. I know the smell and taste of dwarf, no one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You'll come to a bad end if you go with such friends. Thief, barrel rider, I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But he did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make out at all. Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they are skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking for them. And you will get a fair share? Don't you believe it. If you get off alive, you will be lucky. Bilbo was now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smog's roving eye, seeking for him in the shadows, flashed across him, he trembled. An unaccountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself and tell all the truth to Smog. In fact, he was in grievous danger of coming under the dragon spell. But plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smog the Mighty, said he. Not gold alone brought us hither. Ha ha, you admit the us, laughed Smog. Why not say us 14 and be done with it? Mr. Lucky Number, I'm pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts besides my gold. In that case, you may, perhaps not altogether, waste your time. I don't know if it has occurred to you that even if you could steal the gold, Bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you could not get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me, had you never thought of the catch? A 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. Those are the terms, eh? But what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls? And Smog laughed aloud. He had a wicked and a wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected that the lake men were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgaroth. You will hardly believe it, but poor Bilbo was really very taken aback. So far, all his thoughts and energies had been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered to wonder how the treasure was to be removed. Certainly never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way to Bag End under Hill. Now, a nasty suspicion began to grow in his mind. Had the dwarves forgotten this important point too? Or were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect that dragon talk has on the inexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smog had rather an overwhelming personality. I tell you, he said, in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and to keep his end up, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill, by wave and wind, for revenge. Surely, O Smog, the unassembly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smog really did laugh, a devastating sound that which shook Bilbo to the floor, while far up in the tunnel the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the Hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. Revenge, he snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, Lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong. Thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords, my claws spears. The shock of my tail, a thunderbolt. My wings are a hurricane, and my breath, death. I have always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, that dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of the earth chest. But doubtless one so fortified has thought of that. The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Well, your information is antiquated, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me. I might have guessed it, said Bilbo. Truly, there can nowhere be found the equal of Lord Smog the Impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds. Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smog, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the Hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his peculiar undercovering on his previous visit, and was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said. What do you say to that? Dazzlingly marvelous, perfect, flawless, staggering. The exclaimed Bilbo aloud. But what he thought inside was, "Old fool, why, there is a large patch in the hollow of his left breast as bare as a snail out of its shell." After he had seen that Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away. "Well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer," he said, "or keep you from much needed rest. Ponies, take some catching. I believe, after a long start, and so do burglars," he added as a parting shot, as he darted back and fled up the tunnel. It was an unfortunate remark, for the dragon spouted terrific flames after him, and fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of Smaug was thrust against the opening behind. Luckily, the whole head and jaws could not squeeze in, but the nostrils sent forth fire and vapor to pursue him, and he was nearly overcome and stumbled blindly on, in great pain and fear. He had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smaug, but his mistake at the end shook him into better sense. "Never laugh at live dragons, Bilbo, you fool," he said to himself, and it became a favorite saying of his later and passed into a proverb. "You aren't nearly through this adventure yet," he added, and that was pretty true as well. That's the end of chapter 12, and it's time for me to put on this magic invisibility ring and disappear.